Welcome everybody, my name is EruptionFang and this is episode 10 of Nomad of Nowhere, titled The Witch and the Night. So we do not directly see the aftermath of the Nomad getting shot, rather we get a flashback to a time long ago. The creation of the Nomad. He is indeed not human. He was brought to life by a combination of a magic user and a stone, and he inhabits the corpse of a mere scarecrow. This is good storytelling. The show is pacing itself out in a great way. Yes, everyone knew that something was up with the Nomad, but no one knew what it was exactly. We didn't know if he could be dissected, if he could be shot in the heart. The audience knew something was up, but we didn't know what it was. But the show kept it interesting, and it withheld it long enough that now it's an appropriate time to give us answers. It's not overhyped, it wasn't anticlimactic, it was just a great time to reveal this information. But back to the episode. So it is also revealed to us who that girl was back in episode 1 that the Nomad had a seeming flashback of. Her name is Melinda, and when she was a child, her papa created the Nomad to protect her. During this time, magic was still very illegal, but Melinda's dad thought it very important that she learn how to protect herself. So both the Nomad and Melinda were in this mutual training stage. Melinda needed to hone her magic, and the Nomad needed to learn how to protect. Unfortunately, Melinda accidentally gets her magic spotted by the public, and so El Rey's army is sent to collect Papa, inevitably resulting in his death. What I like about Papa was that he was a very real character. Yes, he was nice and personable and all this stuff, but those weren't the reasons that I liked him. He was never absolute about anything. He didn't have this perfect master plan of life. He was concerned for his daughter, and so he taught her how to use magic. But he made sure that she knew that magic was outlawed. He knew that he'd be caught, but he didn't know when. He intended to use the stone to bring magic back to the world, but it only brought magic to a measly scarecrow, that of which his powers he wasn't even aware of. Most things didn't go according to plan for him, as life is. But he always just rolled with whatever happened. He, for the most part, was optimistic, but not entirely. He said he knew that he'd eventually be found, which is a fairly pessimistic thought to have. He didn't believe his life would end in a happily ever after. It seems as though he was content with his fate. And so the best thing he could do was try to bring magic back to the world. That didn't happen, so the next best thing was to ensure that his daughter not suffer the same fate. He was a good character, and I like that he did have a little bit of pessimism inside of his optimism. So the Nomad and Melinda eventually make their way to another town where we see how the general public's view on magic stands.
The king's men came for her one night. Caught her trying to slip away to live with the elves. Keep your eyes peeled.
The two now have a wanted poster of their very own being labeled as The Witch and the Night. Side note here, whoever in Nowhere is in charge of making these wanted posters should be reassigned, right? Not like the actual artist, but like the in-universe artist, right? Like at what point is El Rey or someone going to look at the wanted poster and look at the person and be like, yeah, these don't look anything like them. It's cool, awesome art, but I don't know if a wanted poster is a place to express your creative freedom. I'd think if anything, you'd want accuracy when it comes to a wanted poster. I mean, look at them, and look at this. What knight looks like this? Is it Shredder? I mean, he's not even a knight, he's like a ninja or something. I mean, you got the pointy hat, the pointy claws on a human. Everything is so pointy. No one is ever going to get caught if they're hunting down caricatures. Side note, the man said that the witch ran away to live with the elves.
Caught her trying to slip away to live with the elves.
Those are the Yadalans, right? Those are the people who use magic. There could be a race of actual elves, but I don't know whether or not I should be taking this literally or like a racism thing. I'm more on the side that this is discrimination, that the Yadalans aren't very well liked amongst the general public. But I mean, elves, they're cool. It's like in real life when you call a midget a dwarf. It's like dwarves are also pretty awesome, but for whatever reason it functions as a slur. That's the way I'm seeing it right now. There's no real ground to base it off of because the only Yadalans we've seen are Toth and Null, and they work under Dawn, and everyone who works under Dawn is equally oppressed. So it's not like we've seen if there really is this sort of racism towards their kind, or maybe they're just actual elves, but I still think it's racism. Anyway, so we fast forward through time. Melinda is now a teenager to young adult, and we visit a familiar place. Bliss Hill. They don't cause any real sort of trouble aside from bringing magic to their town. The real purpose of this all was to show us that Melinda's magic has been improving as she's now capable of wiping people's memories. Her and the Nomad then promptly retreat back to their forest. Melinda believes that if she and the Nomad really are the last two magic users in Nowhere, then it's up to them to put a stop to El Rey. She pleads with the Nomad to help, but he sticks true to Papa's request and decides to make sure she stays safe. Because of his decision, she uses her magic to completely wipe all memories he has of her, which is all of them. She promises that once she figures out a way to stop El Rey, she will return. We then snap back to modern day as he is captured and in the hands of Don Paragon. Let's first talk about the modern day stuff. So we didn't see it, maybe we'll see it next episode, but the Nomad has been captured. There's two scenarios, one of which is more likely than the other. First, Red Manuel captured him. He was there, shot him, and took him in. This is the less believable one because if Red Manuel captured the Nomad himself, then Scout's dead. He didn't shoot the Nomad, take him down, and then claim his prize. He intended to kill Scout. There's no reason he would have a change of heart. And this leads to the second scenario. The only way Scout lives is if Toth comes in and stops Red Manuel, saves Scout, and then claims the Nomad. This is the likely scenario of the two. So now Toth has successfully fulfilled her goal and could possibly save her people. But we still don't know what that means. But let's talk about the magic stone. So the Nomad was shot in the heart, but as we learned this episode, he's a scarecrow, so he has no internal organs. The only thing of importance would be the stone. So then question comes into play, was the stone shot? We heard a shatter sound when it was hit, but I don't believe the stone was broken. If the stone breaks, then I think the Nomad dies. He couldn't possibly be immortal under every circumstance. But I don't know how he would have been knocked out if the stone wasn't hit. Surely if it missed, the bullet would have passed right through him. But the thing about the stone is that it isn't a heart. It's worn as a necklace, meaning it resides in the center of his chest. So if he was shot in the heart, it would have missed. That is, of course, unless the show was playing with physics so much, like a necklace would act when you move into a direction, the necklace goes the opposite way. So when the Nomad rushed to the right, the necklace did indeed move into the left side of his chest. But that would be an unbelievable amount of attention to detail that it's just the works of a crazy person. So I don't know what the show intends to do, but it couldn't have been shattered. Let me tell you why. Nomad of Nowhere is much more clever with its writing than, say for example, RWBY. In RWBY, when it comes to exposition, they'll literally gather everyone around a table and explain things to you. Here's what's going on, here's what we plan to do next. There's nothing to it. But Nomad of Nowhere disguises its exposition to make the audience believe that no one knows anything for sure. But in reality, it is telling us these things to make sure that the audience know. Take for example episode 5. I believe it was during their RTX 2018 panel where they were talking about the episode and they said something along the lines of, they needed a way to dump exposition on us.
Miles and I wrote that episode and we were kind of like struggling not to make it all very expository and just having like, because the whole episode takes place with the Undertaker basically talking to himself because the Nomad can't talk.
Yeah.
So we were trying to keep it interesting and like it just was like really dark and he was
That was the thing
talking
too.
a lot.
Like we wanted it to be really spooky because he's just like vomiting exposition, but we tried to make it like really demented and upsetting because then it's like you're too on the edge of your seat. Like what's this crazy guy going to do with the Nomad and not paying attention to the fact that we're just telling you how the Nomad's powers work.
But it didn't feel like an exposition dump because it wasn't telling us anything. Rather, it was questioning everything. What would happen if the Nomad was dissected? You'll find straw and a magic stone. Are his creations meant to protect him? In a way, yes, his creations are meant to protect. It showed us the rules of what he can and cannot bring to life. These are all things that when you go back and watch the episode, you'll realize that a lot of what he said was indeed true because it was meant to be. The writers wanted to ensure that things aren't coming from thin air. It's giving you these thoughts, but allowing you to form your own twists on them. And that's why I believe the stone isn't broken. Papa's original intention for it was to bring magic back to Nowhere. Just it didn't do that, rather it brought life to a single scarecrow. But that doesn't mean that his theory on the stone can't come true. It just yielded an alternate outcome that he was also fine with. So if the stone is destroyed, how does magic get brought back? Kind of a long explanation, but I eventually got there. Then you have Melinda. We finally learned what that scene was back in the first episode. The Nomad began remembering the memories that were stolen from him, which was over 100 years ago. So, there are a few scenarios that we can speculate about her. Considering it was over 100 years ago, she's dead. She died. She said she would return when she figured out a way to stop Elray, and that never happened. But then this is where Scout comes into play. The general public's theories about her now include a few things. First, she's a descendant. Melinda would be her great-grandmother or something like that. One of the problems I have with this was the fact that Melinda was very clearly British, whereas Scout is very heavily Southern. Both very thick accents, but very different. So I don't necessarily subscribe to the whole descendant theory just yet. One of the other ones is that Scout is Melinda, just a reincarnated version. She said she'd return, and technically she did, just not as expected. For me, this is the more believable of the two, but I don't personally believe it. If Scout also had lapses in her memory and didn't remember her past, then I'd be more inclined to believe it. But she talks about her family and her parents and her home. If this is Melinda reincarnated, then she would have had to have been reincarnated as a baby. Like I said, I don't necessarily believe either of these two right now, but weirdly enough, I don't know what to believe. I don't know why Melinda and Scout look so identical. Where I'll place my answer right now is there is no connection. Scout and Melinda have absolutely nothing to do with one another, just a coincidence. I don't 100% believe myself when I say that, but that's where I'll place my current thought about the scenario. But this episode was amazing. Arguably the best one so far, and I didn't even talk about the music. This is like the only time we've heard just music in general from this show. It uses a lot of sound effects and instruments to make noise, but having an actual jingle was so good, and I loved it. The only other one that I can think off the top of my mind is the Nomad's theme song, but it hasn't really played out really in the main show. I believe it was in the credits for probably episode 1, but you gotta feel how it mixes in the show. But yeah, as I mentioned, the way the show masks its exposition is great. Being able to see a character's past is actually quite rare for Rooster Teeth shows. RVB strives on the anonymity, Ruby just fails to do it, and for the rest of the shows, it's not really important to anything. Nomad of Nowhere so far has been hitting it out of the park. The story structure to me is great because it doesn't treat the audience like an idiot. It's like it knows what we think with the information that we have. It doesn't try to prolong some sort of unnecessary mystery. It makes you question moments and details, but will reveal to you an answer. But I think most importantly, it's not afraid to set things in stone. This is what happened to this character in the past. I don't worry that this show won't answer questions that it's brought up because this episode has proven that it'll give us answers. It very easily could have kept Melinda's existence in the shadows for another season, but it didn't. The show is definitely much more than met the eye when the trailer came out. I didn't even think the show looked good from the trailer, but with the way it's been written and directed, it's top tier with Rooster Teeth's narratively written shows. So for now, that is going to do it for this episode. Be sure to let me know what you guys thought of it down in the comments below. Be sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you're interested in more content like this. Consider becoming a sponsor over on Patreon. You get all the content early, and it really does help out the channel. Be sure to follow me on all social medias, and I'll see you in the next video.